James Furlo here. I've got an interesting 3-bedroom, 1-bath fix and flip property in Corvallis, Oregon that I want to show you. And I think you're going to find that there's a theme here of the numbers that were given to me, which is essentially optimistic. The world is awesome. Everything's going to work out great. And you'll see it when I run through the numbers. But first, let me show you this property and what's going on with it. All right, you are instantly going to see that this is a fixer-upper. And to be honest, this yard picture actually looks a lot better than it is today. The grass is much longer. Look at these interior shots. So we've got, this is a bedroom that's like not real floor, that's like tile stuff. Who knows what's there? That is as nasty as it looks in that particular photo. This is a tiny little baby unit. The backyard, yeah, I don't know. They had some sort of animal stuff back there. This is another bedroom, just gross. They've got some overgrown stuff. The roof, not in great shape. You can see the gutters don't look great. This is, yeah, it's a problem. I can't remember now. Did I actually see the water heater? I feel like I must have. And then let's see, there must have been, okay, so here's the kitchen. And so just super dirty. At the end of the day, this is a, for the most part, gut it, fix it, flip it type of deal. And they're asking $250,000 for a place like this with an after repair value of $425,000. So you do the quick math and you go, oh man, this ought to be great. They also estimate that it will cost about $85,000 to fix up, to take it from, well, this to something that looks a lot nicer. So let's actually dive into the numbers and see how this looks. These are the numbers that they gave me. So again, acquisition price, $250,000, repair cost, $85,000, ARV, which is after repair value, is $425,000. And so on the surface of it, man, this thing looks great. But they also expect you're gonna hold it for 85 days, so a little under 3 months. They say, okay, if you get a loan for 80%, that's $200,000. That means you have a down payment of 20%. That means to pay for the loan and some other interest, and I don't fully know what assumptions they're using there, but they say it'll be a little over $71,000. Then when you sell it, there's some expenses to that, plus some carrying costs of $26,000. Oh, and then they break it all down. But essentially, here's what they're saying. You will make $56,000 off of this project. Whoa, right? 3 months worth of work, $56,000. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. And so then they break down some of the things. They say real estate commissions is 5%, marketing is $150. Yeah, you're gonna have some staging stuff. No seller concessions, and no excise tax apparently. And then they'll have some title and some escrow expenses that add up to 0.75%. And then for the loan cost, so they're saying you're gonna get a 10% interest only loan, and you're gonna pay 1% in points. And then finally, while you're managing and going through this flip, you're going to pay some utilities, about $75 a month, and you're going to pay insurance of $75 a month for a total of $425. So that's how they get to these total numbers here. Okay, yeah, again, looks great. Now what I want to do is throw it into my spreadsheet and show you how this actually looks. This is a new spreadsheet. I haven't ever shared this one before, so I think you're going to get a kick out of it. But essentially, we have the same numbers here. It's $250,000, ARV of $425,000. Woohoo! I ran some comps on them, and I found 4 others in the neighborhood that had sold in the last 3 to 4 months. And so you can see they're $425,000. It's a little above average, but it's within the bounds. Not bad. I also assume that there's going to be some hard money lending here of $200,000, and then you'll have, in my case, gap funding, because I'm not going to pay for the entire thing, to cover the initial purchase and those repairs. And here's kind of how this $344 gets spread out. Yeah, we do a lot to buy it, and then we are going to stabilize it, and almost all of it's going to go towards the rehab. And you can just, this is a placeholder. It's not all exterior, but that's all that is. It's a placeholder to get it to $85,000, because that was all they gave me, was a placeholder. They didn't actually break down what the repairs would be. I've got some other metrics here that help me determine, okay, is this a good deal? So I have like a deal health here, and I should probably take back a step. One of the things that I do is run a Monte Carlo simulation, and that's what this middle one is here. So there are some unknowns to doing this project. I actually don't know how much this thing will sell for. I don't know what my total rehab cost will be, and I don't know how long I'm going to hold on to this for. And so what I do is I run 1,000 different simulations that change all of those parameters based on different inputs. So like, for example, the ARV, it's not always going to be 425. Instead, I look at those comps and I figure out what the range is for that. And that is what determines where my comp will land, somewhere in there. I do the exact same thing for my budget costs for my rehab. They're not just point estimates, they're actually a range. And I use the range to figure out, okay, how much is this going to shift by? And so when I do that, I can get a sense for how good of a deal this is. So here, my deal health is saying it's in the green range. Green means it's my ideal target, and I am well within that at 52,000. Yellow means I'm making money, so it's okay, but it's not as much as I would like to make for the amount of time I'm putting in. And then if it's red, it's very much a don't do this deal. This Monte Carlo shows where those different simulations all land. And basically what I'm looking at is for this blue line to at least be in the middle, if not down here, because this tells me that in order for this to work out, a lot of my numbers need to be optimistic. They need to be on the better side of the equation. My ARV needs to be higher. My rehab costs need to be lower. My hold time needs to be quicker, that kind of stuff. So I then have the next section is telling what my investors will make. And in this case, I'd be paying them 12%, though they only actually make 2.8 because I would hold it for so quick. And so I would get $144,000 from investors, and I would return to them a little over $4,000. Or another way to say it, if you invested $25K, I'd give you $708 back. It's not a great deal for investors. I mean, percentage-wise, yeah, sure, it's great. It's just so fast that the return isn't much. And then I have a bridge, and I'll be honest, this is actually just for my own sake of keeping everything sane. Saying, okay, where is the money coming from? I'm going to get it from a hard money lender, and gap funding, those are individual private investors. That gets me to my total amount, and then I'm going to spend the money buying it, acquiring it, stabilizing it, making loan payments, and then I'm going to sell it. Boom, the number goes way up, but then I got to pay back the funds to people. I'm going to have some net stuff, and I'm going to have some closing costs, and I get my sale proceeds. And I've got some other numbers that kind of just show the raw numbers of it. And again, sale proceeds, this is an awesome deal. Okay, I have some issues though with some of his numbers. So I want to tweak some of the inputs here and show you that this may not be as good of a deal as what these guys are presenting. These are all of my inputs. Green means put a number in and it will flow through the sheet. And if it's not, don't mess with it. So for the hold time here, yeah, maybe it will happen in under 3 months. That's possible. But let's just say that it's actually 5 months. Yes, the ARV could be 425, but the actual average is only 415. So I'm going to change that to 415. Closing costs, they have none, which I think is kind of surprising actually, unless they know something that I don't. And as a general rule, what I put for closing costs is 1.5% of whatever the purchase price is. So we're going to add that in there. Their holding costs, I think is really interesting. They have $75 for utilities and $75 for the loan. I disagree with that number. I'll run with the $75 for utilities, but I actually know because I have another property where insurance is $90 a month for it. So that number's already low, and they're not factoring for taxes. I know you don't necessarily pay them all at once, but you are accruing that payment. It's kind of a phantom expense that's there that needs to be accounted for. So when I do that, it takes it significantly higher. Here's another interesting one. They assume that the resale commissions was only 5%. I wonder who it is that they decided is going to not get a percentage here. For me, I tend to be conservative. I'm going to assume that everyone wants their 3%, and maybe I can do better on my negotiation, perhaps. They only had 0.75 for the closing. I tend to put in 1%, and that's just based on other numbers that I've comped it by. It always comes out to be about 1%. Another interesting thing is the hard money lender. They assumed that there was going to be only 1 point at 10% interest. This is fantastic. I would love to know who their hard money lender is. That's not how I get it. Mine charges me 3 points and they charge 12%. So all that I've done is I have messed with some of the baseline assumptions that they have for this in terms of the acquisition and some other areas. I haven't even touched the repair budget yet. And so now, if we come back over, see now you can see I am right in line with what the average is for this area. And now you can see my deal health is actually only 18,000. It's lower than what my ideal number would be for making a return for all of the work, but at least it's positive. So that's a good thing. And you can see in terms of my Monte Carlo simulation, I've brought it closer into the middle. And the dark blue means it goes negative, and we want to avoid that at all costs. It's not as good of a deal as it once was. Though, for an investor standpoint, it actually is a little bit better because now that I'm holding to it for 5 months, you actually are getting more money. It's the exact same amount prorated from an annualized return standpoint, but just the total ROI is better because you've held it longer. And the investment bridge all looks exactly the same. It's just some different numbers going back and forth. And so you can already see all I've done, and this is how important some of these assumptions are, that this is not nearly as good of a deal when you start to account for, oh, I even forgot something. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did it. I also account for a 10% reserves, which always happens. You never know. And so for me, what I want to know is, am I paying someone for the lead? Are there any arrears that I have to also account for? It's not just, oh, are there closing costs? When I add in this 10% reserves here, it actually lowers the overall deal health even more. Now, in theory, it's just reserves. And so if things all work out, I don't have to dip into the reserves. I do get those back, but I think it's worth having in there. All right. Now let's talk about their $85,000. Let's remember what this place looked like, okay? They're saying that for $85,000, you'll be able to fix this, you'll be able to fix these rooms, you'll be able to, wherever that kitchen is, you'll be able to fix this utility room, fix the kitchen. They're making some pretty bold claims in terms of the cost. Now, I don't own a contracting company. I don't have guys who are on staff who I can just pay to do stuff. I don't have access to a lot of really cheap supplies. And so for me, I'm going to pay closer to retail. And so I did some research, and let me show you what I came up with. This is my rehab budget. And so I went in and I did the research on what it would take to repair some siding, to replace the roof, which is about 18 squares to do it, to replace the gutters, which is 165 feet, to redo the driveway, which, believe me, needs to be redone, to paint the outside, to do some landscaping. And I might be honest, that might be a little low based on what I've seen in the backyard. But for now, we're going to roll with it because it's not the biggest expense by far. And so even just on the exterior, I'm somewhere between $25,000 and $37,000. And then we get to the interior part where, again, I'm going to paint. I'm going to be replacing some flooring. There's going to be some junk removal. I'm going to replace some windows. I'm going to replace some doors. It needs a new AC unit. It needs new heaters. It needs a massive kitchen remodel and a bathroom complete remodel. Those are some big numbers. Just on the inside, I'm somewhere between $54,000 and $83,000. And so I can add all of those up. And even when I add a contingency here, that of 10%, that gets my total rehab cost to $88,000 to $134,000. And so one of the things you can see is they were very optimistic. They are choosing, for the most part, the low end on all of these deals. I don't know the logic behind that. I'm not trying to suggest that it's nefarious. They may simply be assuming that whoever does this has a crew and is able to get the lower end cost of this. Or perhaps they're assuming it's people who are going to be doing a lot of work themselves and therefore saving on the labor, and that's where they're going to get their savings from. But for me, I tend to be conservative, and so I put in the 132.9 for my number, and if I'm able to get it to 88, awesome, cool, but I'm not going to assume that. I want the deal to work in a worst case scenario. So now let's take a look and see how this deal looks. We're still buying it for $250. We're saying the after repair value is $415. And here's now we're going to be spending the money, some on the interior, some on the exterior, and then we've got our contingency amount, plus we've got our reserve in there. Here's our deal health. Oh, man, this hurts. So if I did this deal with all of these numbers, it would be a negative $46,000 return to me. That's not great. But from a Monte Carlo simulation standpoint, you can see it is now past the midpoint. So to me, this is a very good visual way of telling me that this is a conservative, well-reasoned underwriting estimate. And ideally, it'd be closer somewhere in the middle. But even then, it's still going to be a negative deal. So this to me is very, very concerning. So the question becomes, all right, so what can we do in order to fix this problem? What would the offer have to be in order to make this work? Well, I already have one clue, and one is by using what they call the flipper rule. And so what that says is that the maximum that you want to offer is 70% times the after repair value minus whatever your repairs are. And in this case, that would be about 158,000 would be my max. Now, I don't actually have to make that much, but I do want to make some sort of return. And so we can at least start with calculating what is my break-even number. So to do that, I come over to data, I do a what if analysis, a simple goal seek, and I'm going to say I want to set my return to 0 by changing this purchase price. And if we come in and do that, it's going to do some solving. Woohoo! Comes out to $206,000. So we can just visually verify that, yeah, we are now like right on the edge. We're making 0. It's not great, but there it is. But the maximum that I would be willing to offer to break even, to essentially volunteer my time to fix up this place, would be $206,000. Now, obviously, that's not what I would go for. And I may consider making an offer at $200,000 and try to find places in my rehab where I can save some money and try to go like, maybe it's not going to be the 132, maybe it will be a little bit more down the middle. So for example, I have a rehab sensitivity here where I can sit there and say, well, if I can get my rehab budget down to be 112,000, I'll actually make some money. Not quite what my goal would be, but it's there. What would have to happen to get it to be like $100,000? For example, I own a paint sprayer. Maybe I'm the one who ends up doing the painting on the inside and outside. That alone, assuming it's on the top end, would net me that $20,000 that would help me hit my number. So that's a little bit about how I think about the underwriting and how I can kind of tweak and change to try to make something work. But the real big takeaway here that I wanted to show was that you gotta check the numbers that someone gives you, because directionally they were right. They just tended to all be a little bit optimistic. And when you do that, it adds up to a deal that looks unbelievably good, where you go, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make $52,000 on this deal. And then you get into it and you go, oh, there was an extra closing cost. Oh, my holding costs were a little bit higher. Oh, when I sold, I had to pay an extra percentage. Oh, when I had to do my rehab, it wasn't 85, it was actually 100,000. And all of that adds up to where you go, oh my gosh, I lost money on this deal where I should not have lost money on a $250,000 purchase because of all these other expenses. So there you go. I love underwriting properties like this. It is just, it's just so interesting, so much fun. And if you liked watching this, I would love it if you liked the video, and I would also love it if you left a comment on your thoughts about this property. What do you think? Good deal, bad deal? What would you think about offering given everything that you've seen here? Have a great day.